Vehicular electronics. If you're anything like me, you've probably dealt with the frustrations of wiring a vehicle. The ever monotonous task of chasing a wiring gremlin, figuring out why that fuse just blew, or learning what it feels like to have 12 volts touched directly to your bare skin. Well, luckily for you, you're in the right place to learn how to avoid at least one of these things. I think. In this video, we're going to be covering the topics of switches and relays, wiring, and everything else. Starting off with switches and relays. Relays and switches, often thought to be separate things, are actually identical in their nature. See, while they're in different housings, they perform practically the same thing. While a switch is manually operated by your finger, a relay is operated by electronic pulses, whereas the electronic pulse tells the switch to fire, kind of like you do with your own finger. Thankfully for you guys, I've taken the time to carefully take apart this relay for you, which took an alarming amount of time and definitely didn't take me like 5 takes, but I'm just going to speed it up for you until I get the relay open. Finally, with the relay being opened, we can take a closer look at the actual electrical terminals of the relay and see that, in effect, it is basically just a very small switch, which is similar to the operation of a regular switch. See, switches come in all sorts of shapes and sizes too. You have trigger switches, ignition switches, button switches, relay switches, finger switches, normal switches, and all the switches too. Now at this point in the video, if you're still watching, you're probably still wondering exactly how switches work. Well, lucky for you, I've included a short little TED Talk that only takes a little bit of time and it has only a slightly weird accent that explains exactly how switches work.
Hello, welcome to my TED Talk. On this video, I'm going to be explaining how switches work. So, okay, shoot. Alright, so we take the red, why is it so small? Brush? Okay, so we take the red positive wire, right?
You know what, maybe not all mysteries are meant to be solved. We're just going to come back to this one and move on to their next subject. Wiring. Now wiring is something that is pretty much everywhere on the vehicle. I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks on how to diagnose wiring issues. Disclaimer, if your car is newer than like 1990, this will not help you at all because I guarantee you most of that stuff is going to be doing with your computer, which is not my problem. I work with old cars, but if you have an old car, yeah, you get the point. What you want to do is you want to take out your handy dandy multimeter. If you don't have a handy dandy multimeter, then you want to go down to the store and get yourself a handy dandy multimeter. And I recommend going to a store that sells handy dandy multimeters. I don't have a recommended brand in mind, but one that preferably is a multimeter would be a good choice for you. Next, the way you use your handy dandy multimeter is you want to set it to your 20 volt or equivalent, depending on what your multimeter says, and use the red, positive, and black, negative, depending on it. I don't know if the colors are universal, I couldn't tell you. But the way you test it, I don't know why you'd be testing, but the way you test it is you hook the positive up to positive wires usually, and the negative up to negative wires, and you'll get a readout. This is the part where the cameraman was supposed to tilt the camera up and show a readout, but he didn't because he's stupid. And now, I don't know why I'm still whispering, and now, for the final segment of wiring, or kind of final segment of wiring, let's run through some ultra-realistic scenarios that happen to all of us every single day. Alright, first basic generic scenario to help you through this. Say you go to start your vehicle, and out of nowhere, when you turn the key, nothing, okay? Normally with this vehicle specifically, when you turn the key, the fuel pump should kick on, but in this case it didn't because of my own doing. You're welcome. The first obvious place to test for issues like this is testing whether or not the wire is getting power. You want to locate the positive wire for your fuel pump and test whether or not, okay, is the power getting past the ignition switch. That's usually failure point 1, your ignition switch, because that is a switch that takes the positive power from your battery and inputs it to the fuel pump itself. Point 2 is your fuse bank. Your fuse bank, in a lot of cars, are at different spots, but for this vehicle specifically, and especially a lot of older vehicles, is located way down in the pits of darkness underneath the steering wheel to make it as inconvenient as possible for the user to be able to switch fuses. But you want to check and see if your fuses will be blown, which is another topic coming up later. And the third thing you can do is test to see if there's positive electricity going to the fuel pump itself. Now obviously in this scenario I know there's not, because I've thankfully unplugged the wire giving you this scenario. But you want to go along separate points of the wire and figure out where does the positive wire stop. Think of it like you'll take the positive out of the fuse bank, find where its first connection point is, test the connection point by sticking the positive, the 20 volt, and this to a ground source and say, okay, it's positive here. Then you move along to the next positive point and you do the same test. And finally, you might get to your problem, which in this case, again, fortunately because I set this up to be convenient for recording, the wire is disconnected in the rear. As soon as you connect that wire in the rear and go back and turn the key, you'll be able to hear that beautiful chime of 80s fuel pumps. Hey again. So on to lesson 2, continuity. Continuity is something that is very important with testing vehicular electronics, as it enables you to tell whether or not a wire is continuous, which is within its name. Unfortunately, my multimeter does not have a setting, so I can't give you a live demonstration while I hold the multimeter, but I can explain it to you in layman's terms. Think about it like this. We have our green wire right here, and we can see the green wire is completely unseparated. If I were to have a multimeter that had a continuity setting, I would take the one peg and put it in this hole, and take the other peg and test it on this wire. If this wire is not continuous, say there's a break somewhere in the wire line, then they will read 0. But if it is continuous, it will do something else, likely beep or some other form of reaction for continuity. This is helpful because think of our fuel pump situation again. If you found that all the wires were connected, but you couldn't find where it stopped having positive current, i.e. at connection points, then you can trace the wire's continuity to see where it was last had continuity. Or in certain cases, if you don't have the ability to get positive connection to a wire, say a ground wire, which is not going to have positive, then you can use the continuity setting again to test for continuity on a ground. Granted, that's a little different because grounds are usually localized to the chassis and aren't going to be running from one side of the car to the other, but still helpful in that scenario nonetheless. And now, for the segment that you guys all waited for. Everything else! As part of the everything else segment, I'm going to split it up into 2 components, which I'm holding the wrong things, but the 2 main components are important essential items and non-important essential items. Basically think of it as, what do I need to actually run my car? These things. And what do I not need to run my car? The horn. That's pretty much it. Alright, on to our first item, the ignition system. That's our first important electrical item to be able to start your car. With the ignition system, if we come around to this beautiful engine bay of this 1974 Alfa Romeo Spider, that's totally for sale, definitely not, we have our first component, the spark plug. The spark plug is the first major electrical component in the ignition system by providing spark to the actual engine itself. It utilizes a current from the top of its point and a ground from its threads to be able to arc between the 2 points inside of the spark plug itself. Modern cars, unfortunately, don't have the next component, so if you have a modern car, again, this is the wrong video for you. Click off. I don't know. So, the next component of the ignition system to realize and understand is spark wires. Now, why I say modern cars don't have this is because modern cars have ignition coils, which are annoying, but I guess more effective. Spark wires take that power from the ignition coil, which I will get to, sends it through the distributor cap and up to the wire. This is what creates that high current and allows the spark to be able to arc and create this spark, hence the name spark plug. Next component, as explained, the distributor cap. As beautifully seen buried within this Italian engine, so you can barely see it, the distributor cap, or as shown over here, is a small cap that utilizes a rotor inside of it spinning off of a graphite or other material tip, and it arcs off each current point and sends electrical pulses through said spark wires. Think of it kind of like a junction box for your electric current through your car. This gets an electric pulse, usually from the center, which comes from your ignition coil. Your ignition coil turns your battery voltage into high amperage, which allows those arcs to take force. Instead of having low amperage and high voltage, it does low voltage and high amperage. To correct myself, the ignition coil is something that takes a lot of power and sends it to your sparks. I don't actually know how it works, I'm not gonna lie. That part you can look up, but just it's important in the ignition system, and oftentimes this is the failure point or the distributor cap itself that you want to look for whenever your sparks aren't working. This is the main important electric components for your vehicle. The only other thing to consider would be the ignition switch itself, which is basically a main terminal for your car to send power wherever you want it, and your fuel pump. Those three items are the biggest and most important things within your car. Granted, headlights are kind of important too in the night, and the horn might be important. But the other electronic components are not really necessary, like your radio. I mean, you kind of want to listen to music, but still. Point being, these are the things to focus on. So whenever your car isn't starting, you always want to consider three things. Is it getting compression? Is it getting spark, which is an electric component? And is it getting gas? Also electric component. So two of the three things that has your car start in the morning is electrical components. So it's very important to know these things. Granted, usually the fuel pump is with the fuel tank, and usually the ignition is with the engine. If it's not, I don't know what you're doing with your car. But that's all I have for this today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all later.
New title of the video is College Student Dies Trying to Connect Exposed Wires to Car Battery.